It's funny. I have listened to him since probably 1979. I would have been a sophomore in high school. And at the time, you would hear like a Rolling Stone on the radio. You would hear Positively 4th Street, which is the one about, you've got a lot of nerve to say that you are my friend. When I was down, you just stood there grinning and blah, blah, blah. Or Rainy Day Women, which is the Everybody Must Get Stoned song.
Right.
And I didn't care for that one so much. And to this day, I still don't care for that as much. So I don't really know what song it was that made me go, there's something here. But I went out and bought a couple of his albums. And probably the first one I bought was Bringing It All Back Home, which would have been his 5th album, I think. And that was the first one where I think one side was acoustic, one side was electric. And it came out, I think, in 1964. And I just loved it. There was just not a aha moment, but I just knew listening to it that he was different than anybody else I had listened to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and once again, we are steering off the Springsteen train or sailboat, but he will bring up, as he normally do. We are going back to Buffett land, maybe a little Dylan land, Africa for sure, because I'm returning guest Jack Hyland is joining me today. Jack, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. And once again, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you just mentioned before we hit record, your wife just returned home. And you will be heading out in a week. Talk to me, remind my listeners, first off, remind your listeners who you are, a little about yourself, and then let's talk about this big journey, this adventure you're about to go on.
Okay, so my name is Jack Hyland. I am 57 years old. I currently live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is pretty much directly between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. And I've lived here most of my life with stopovers in White Plains, New York, which is where I was born, Charleston, South Carolina, Key West, Florida, Southern California. And the big one, my wife works for an energy company, and currently she is posted, if that's the right word, in Luanda, Angola, which is on the lower west coast of Africa.
Okay.
She's been there off and on for about 3 years. It mostly off because of COVID. She was sent home for about 10 months for COVID. But she went back in February, and she came home a couple weeks ago for some vacation. And she'll be home another week, and then we are both going back together next Saturday. And the earliest that I think we will return to Virginia is September.
Okay.
She's also in the Navy Reserves. She's got to come home and do 2 weeks of Navy duty. And so, yeah, we'll be there about 2 months and just do what we can do while we're there.
Now, you guys have lived overseas before, correct?
She has. Again, being in the Navy Reserve, she spent a year in Iraq in 2009 and 2010.
Okay.
She was the public affairs officer for the commander of the, I don't have this right. Anyway, she was a public affairs officer for a 4-star general over there.
Okay.
And she was there for a year. And then she came home, and then 4 or 5 years after that, she went to Jordan for 6 months.
Okay.
So she's been gone a lot. I typically stay home. At the time we had a young son, I'd get him to school, get him wherever he needed to go. He is now 25. So
Okay.
he's pretty much on his own, even though he still lives with us. He's going to stay at the house while we're gone, take care of the animals. So I have never lived overseas other than the 3 or 4 months I've been in Africa with her.
Okay.
And at the time I was there, she lived in a apartment complex in the downtown, in the capital.
Okay.
And her office was the next building over. So we never really had to leave the building other than if we wanted to go to the grocery store or, go out and do whatever. But now she lives, I think she told me 9 kilometers outside of the city in a gated community. So
Okay.
that'll be different because we won't be kind of in the middle of the city having to look over our shoulder every time we walk anywhere. And it'll probably be a little more relaxing because we won't have to be on guard the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Well, again, we're already planning on the first time we can take a trip somewhere. So we're looking forward to it. I mean, mostly for her, it's 9 to 5 like anything else. She'll be at work Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then on the weekends, we'll squeeze in whatever we can do. Go from there.
What now how about your gig? Are you working remotely? Or are you
No, I owned a bar and we
Okay.
sold it last year. And for about 35 years, I've wanted to write a book.
Okay.
And I actually started writing my autobiography while I was there the last go around. And when I came home, and I've been home over a year now, I just haven't written a word.
Okay.
So when I go back, I'm going to pick it up, but I'm not going to go into the autobiography thing. Always wanted to write a detective novel.
Okay.
So it may be good, it may be awful, but I'm going to do it while I'm there.
Okay.
So yeah, I got plenty to do while I'm there.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I have no idea what part of Africa that is. Is this it sounds like a pretty strong metropolitan area, but is there a lot of culture there? I mean, what kind of are you looking forward to?
So the country of Angola they call it sub-Sahara, as in below the Sahara. So
Okay.
it's down south, it's below the equator.
Okay.
And we are literally right on the water, right? Luanda Bay is where we were living, right on the harbor. But if you ever go to a bookstore and you go to a travel section and you see books on Africa, you will never find one on Angola. There
Okay.
is no reason to come to Angola unless you work there.
Okay.
It's really, really bleak. Just poverty like you can't imagine.
All right.
Now we go out and this sounds arrogant, American, whatever. We go out on the weekends to play golf, which I even feel silly carrying golf bags around while I see these people who are begging for food.
Sure.
But the golf course that we go to is about an hour outside of town. So we have a car service take us out there. We go play golf. The landscape is, it's all desert and dry, but everything's different. On the East Coast here, it's all pine trees and green, and there it's not.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different kind of beauty that you just have to get used to.
Mhm.
And while we were there, one weekend we flew to Cape Town, South Africa, which was probably a 3-hour flight or so. In Cape Town, it was spectacular,
Yeah.
just mountains and ocean and cool weather, and people spoke English, so we didn't have to worry about finding our way around. And so that's kind of what we want to do is, get out and explore things that we want to be able to really explore from America.
Yeah. Because the commute will be so much shorter, right? Like
Correct.
it's like me in Dallas, Texas, driving to Memphis or Nashville or Louisville, versus if you lived in England, trying to fly over to Louisville,
Correct.
to do the Bourbon Trail is going to be a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what we were kind of thinking. I was like, now that we're here, let's use it as a jumping point. In fact, we were talking about right before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was like, why don't we go to like Austria or Germany, because it's the same time zone.
Okay.
And we won't have to worry so much about, feeling jet lag or tired or worn out. So I thought, okay, we could do that. So that's one thing we're thinking of doing.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Well, very cool. So when you talked about going to the grocery store, I remember the only time I lived overseas, I was in junior high. My dad was stationed in Germany, and we lived on, the base. So,
sure.
there was the commissary, which was in the the post exchange. So everything was American. And though my mom did go to a couple of German grocery stores, and what she was struck by is it was the first time we ever had the small plastic bags, right? Like we were used to big grocery bags, the paper bags that
Sure.
you did, and they were all small bags. And the idea was you the locals did not go to the grocery store once a week and buy for a week. They would go every 2 or 3 days and buy
Right.
things. So
Sure.
that was a culture change for us. Will you be doing mostly shopping local, or is there a, a more European American type service available for you guys?
No, it's all local.
Okay.
And we used to go to, when we lived in the city, we'd go to one particular grocery store, once a week or so. And,
Yeah.
in America, we're so used to going to the grocery store and whatever we want to have, we'll
Yeah.
find it there.
Exactly.
There you're kind of like, oh, shoot, they seem to be out of tomatoes this week
Yeah.
or whatever. So you take what you can get. You don't really make a list because you don't know what you're going to find, but you work around it.
Hmm.
And there's some higher end grocery stores that have better quality meat, food, anything. But now that we're outside the city, I actually haven't been to the local grocery store, so I don't know actually what my wife has been doing as far as going to the grocery store.
Okay.
So we'll find that out pretty much as soon as I get there. I think we have to quarantine for 10 days,
Sure,
which
that
means
makes sense.
we can leave our house, but we can't leave our yard.
Okay.
But my wife she'll have friends she works with, and they'll drop off food for us
Okay.
if we need whatever. So first 10 days, we're just going to catch up on sleep and, kind of get reacquainted with the area. And then we'll go from there.
Well, I would love to have you on, let's say, 2 or 3 months into it, and
Sure.
just to hear, what am I missing? What am
Okay.
I doing? I mean, with the internet, you certainly cannot, you still be able to stay caught up on, news and
Sure.
entertainment and things like that. But I know this is not the same, but when I went to the Philippines for my job, the first time I went, I stayed 2 weeks. The next time I stayed 3 weeks. Um, Fresh brewed iced tea is what I missed the most,
Sure.
because that was not something they had in
Right.
the Philippines.
Sure.
And being in Dallas, Texas, in the South, you had iced tea at every meal.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so I'm curious to see what, I'm sure there'll be small things that you're going, boy, I really enjoy what this item that they're bringing, but I'm sure I'm missing this. So that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. We can definitely do that.
Oh, good.
I know, like my wife, we're bringing like some containers of coffee. We're bringing, necessities,
Hmm.
hot sauces, stuff like that we're accustomed to here that we may not be able to get over there.
Right.
And again, it's like, all right, we're going to a country where so many people are destitute. So,
Yeah.
we're not going to complain about any of it, and we'll get
No.
by. But yeah, I mean, there's just some things you got to have that just kind of make you feel at home and feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
a lot of my wife's coworkers are from England and Scotland,
Yeah.
and I have learned that they like to drink a lot of beer.
Hmm.
So I'm like, oh man, I'm not ready for this again. But again, you make do, and
Yeah.
it's always fun to get together with these people. And like I've said before, by definition, these expats are just a little more adventurous than other folks, or they wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
So everybody just makes the best of it.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
and I would think you would. I remember when, like I said, when my dad was stationed in Germany, we would have a lot of, and you wouldn't even call them parties. You would just have get-togethers, right? That
Sure.
people would come over, and then my dad always played the guitar, so he would have other friends who play the guitar. They'd come over and do jam sessions, or
Sure.
just have visits and talks, and it was pretty interesting for us.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like an exciting, and so that's in a couple weeks.
Actually, a week from today.
Oh, wow. How
And
long
my wife told me she's
yeah.
working on my visa, and my visa doesn't mean I can't get there. It means I might not be able to leave. And I thought, oh, well, that'll be interesting.
uh,
So we'll
yeah,
figure it out. We always do.
yeah. How long of a flight is it?
So typically, like pre-COVID, and the only time I've gone there, we fly from here to Brussels,
Okay.
which is overnight, 7, 8 hours, 8 or 9, I forget exactly. And then from Brussels directly into Luanda,
Okay.
which is another 9 hours or so. But again, it's like you're flying at one point, you're over I think it's the Alps, and then the Apennine Mountains. Then you see the Mediterranean Sea, and then you see the tip of Africa. And for about 3 hours, you see nothing but the Sahara. And you're just looking down there and you're like, I've heard about this place my whole life. And it's just nothing but massive and brown for hours on while you're flying. And so it's an interesting flight. But yeah, so overnight travel totally, depending on what your layover in Brussels may be, 30, 35 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Not terrible. I mean, it's, again, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Are you a binge on movies guy? Do you have your um, MP3 player or your phone loaded with a playlist? What do you do to
Well,
pass the time on the flight?
so on the flight, I just bring books. I actually bring physical books. I mean, my wife's big on the Kindle thing, and I'm
Okay.
just like, I'm not taking a chance that my Kindle, if I had one, doesn't work or I can't get Wi-Fi or whatever.
Yeah.
So I bring physical books, but I also subscribe to Spotify.
Okay.
And if you subscribe to it, you can download songs, podcasts, whatever, without, and you don't need internet to listen to them.
Right.
So I've actually downloaded all the Bruce Obama podcasts, but I haven't listened to them yet. I just kept thinking I'm going to save them for the flight to Angola.
That is a great idea. I listened to them as they came out, and I've been saying that my wife and I, she has not heard them, and I'm like, we need to go on a trip so that we can use that as we'll listen to that. Like we have
Right.
done that a couple of times.
Yeah.
Instead of just music, we'll have a podcast that we both are interested in, and we've
Sure.
used that kind of as a book on tape to get through us our travels.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Strangely enough, so last week was my wife and we had our 26th wedding anniversary.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you. The anniversary is actually on Sunday, but we were sitting down Friday and we thought, what are we going to do tonight for dinner? And I thought, let's go to Keen's. And Keen's is a steakhouse in New York City.
Okay.
So she's like, all right, well, let me see if I can find a hotel in New York. And she's a big Marriott person. So we found a Marriott. It would have taken us a little over 5 hours to get there. It took us about 9 because traffic was terrible and raining, and it was awful. Anyway, so we're driving up there and she said, I've never listened to the podcast that you did. And I'm like, how have you not listened to it? So we actually listened to it on the way up there. And she does a lot of podcasts, a lot of Zoom meetings with work. And I think I told you the time I did it first with you, I'd never done one before.
Right.
So I didn't know whether it was good, bad, or whatever. And she, after listening to it, she's like, that was really good. And I thought, okay, she knows her way around that kind of stuff. So I was happy about that. But yeah, she, aside from the fact that apparently I said literally about 20 sometimes, she thought, other than that, you were actually pretty good. So, but yeah, we listened to that on the way up to New York.
Well, I am glad she enjoyed it. I can only, If she wants to give me some critiques, I will gladly take it with the spirit it's given.
Okay.
I appreciated her listening. I thought you did great,
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad she enjoyed it, and that's
And
good.
here's another aside. So if you remember, I was talking about when I was first introduced to Buffett,
Yes.
and I went to go visit my brother in college, and there were guys painting in his dormitory in the hallways wearing t-shirts and ties. So I forwarded the podcast to one of my friends who I met, who was one of my brother's college roommates. And he said, believe it or not, I have a photograph of one of the guys painting the hallway wearing the t-shirt and tie. And
Oh,
I'm like,
funny.
you're kidding me. And about 2 days later, he sent me the photograph. And I'm like, I cannot believe you have that photo. And then he passed the podcast on to a couple of his friends he went to school with. So it's making the rounds up in Maryland now.
Well, that's nice. I appreciate the downloads.
Yeah.
Always do. That's
Mhm.
good. Well, we talked a little, Jimmy, last time, but you also are a huge Dylan fan,
Yes,
correct?
that is correct. Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about discovering Bob and that your little bit of your Bob journey.
It's funny. I have listened to him since probably 1979. I would have been a sophomore in high school. And at the time, you would hear like a Rolling Stone on the radio. You would hear Positively 4th Street, which is the one about, you've got a lot of nerve to say that you are my friend. When I was down, you just stood there grinning and blah, blah, blah. Or Rainy Day Women, which is the Everybody Must Get Stoned song.
Right.
And I didn't care for that one so much. And to this day, I still don't care for that as much. So I don't really know what song it was that made me go, there's something here. But I went out and bought a couple of his albums. And probably the first one I bought was Bringing It All Back Home, which would have been his 5th album, I think. And that was the first one where I think one side was acoustic, one side was electric. And it came out, I think, in 1964. And I just loved it. There was just not a aha moment, but I just knew listening to it that he was different than anybody else I had listened to. He was different than Billy Joel, who I'd loved. He was different than Elton John, who I loved. He was different than anything that was on the radio then, like, the late 70s, of course, it was the Bee Gees, who I love, by the way. And, it was like Led Zeppelin and that kind of AC/DC stuff that I didn't care for then. But, I hate to say he just spoke to me, but he spoke to me. I got it when other, I was 15 years old, 16 years old. Other guys around me were like, this stuff is terrible. And I'm just like, I guess I get it and you don't. And I don't know what it was, but I was just glad I got it. And so at that time, he had probably had, 15, 17, I don't remember, studio albums out. So I went to go buy them all. Eventually I got them all. And at that time, he was in the middle of his so-called born again phase.
Yes.
And he had come out with the album Slow Train Coming, which was a great album. Then his second album in that trilogy was, I think it was called Saved. And so I remember going to a record store with a friend of mine and trying to talk him into buying it. I bought it, and it wasn't a great album. So my friend was like, yeah, this isn't working for me. And I was like, oh, man, terrible album to try to turn somebody on to Dylan with. But I just kept with it. And I saw him in concert for the first time in 1981. It was about, 2 or 3 weeks after I graduated high school. He played up at Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland, which is where I'd seen Buffett for the first time. And I had been reading Rolling Stone magazine for a while by that point. And everything I read about Dylan was that he wasn't doing anything but his Christian stuff in concert. And I thought, well, I'm going anyway. And so I go up there, and I think the 4th song he played was Like a Rolling Stone. And then I thought, okay, all bets are off, and he just went into, everything else after that, some of the classic songs that you expected to hear. And he's pretty much stuck with that ever since. And then
my buddy Sam is a huge Dylan fan, and I don't know if he can count the amount of times he's seen him. And when Bob played a 3-night here at the Dallas House of Blues, Sam took a vacation to attend all 3 shows.
Oh boy.
And that was the first time, by the way, I thought, wow, that'd be cool to see a artist more than one time on a tour.
Yeah.
Like, before I'd like, oh, okay, I got to see Bruce during this tour, and how fun was that? And then the idea, I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that. And it's I think Sam calls it the never ending tour.
Yes.
That right now he kind of keeps playing, and and you don't get a lot of surprises in the set list, but you also every once in a while he does do something. So yeah.
So I saw him when I was living in New York. He played 3 nights in a row at Madison Square Garden in 1986, and he had Tom Petty as his backup band. So he would come out, they would come out and do songs together. Then Dylan would play a couple acoustic things by himself. Petty would play some of his songs, of Tom Petty's own songs. And then they would come out and play together, mostly Dylan songs. And at the time I was really big into Tom Petty. So it was fabulous for me. So I saw him 3 nights in a row at the Garden. It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. And then the following Monday, he played Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. So I saw him there as well. And I think I saw him another time in that tour down in DC. So I would, I try to catch him at least once a tour now. The last time I saw him, a new arena opened up in Washington, DC.
Okay.
And it probably holds about, 7,000 people. So it's about an hour drive from here. So I went up there. I mean, his voice is shot. But it's still Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And I left the show and I was looking at the set list, and I was reading it, and I thought you could argue that he's got 10 songs that are better than any other song he played that night. I mean, he didn't do Like a Rolling Stone. He didn't do let me think what else. Mr. Tambourine. He didn't do any of the stuff. Yeah. And I was just like, who just plays not their best songs? I mean, if you went to see Bruce, we've talked about this. You go see Bruce and he's not playing Thunder Road or Born to Run, you're going to walk away going, that sucked.
Yes.
And Dylan, he just doesn't care. He just does his own thing. So, and that's also part of what I like about him. I have always said about Dylan, when it comes to Bob Dylan, all bets are off. For instance, I have a thing about Jewish performers who do Christmas albums. I just think it's kind of weird. But when Dylan did one, I thought, okay, once again, all bets are off. And that album just gets killed in the press. And I just think it's a great album. So
my joke to Sam, who is Jewish, or as he says, Jew-ish.
Right.
Not his joke, but he will take it. And hates Christmas music, right?
Right.
In fact, it is a standard joke, like, and he has finally accepted the fact that, because the first 4 or 5 years of our friendship, I would go, and Sam, what are you doing Christmas Day? Nothing.
Right.
Well, come to our house. Jesse, it's just not another day. It's just, and
sure.
And I finally, he has accepted the fact that I cannot, it's Christmas, you're by yourself. If I want you to know that if you want to have a meal, come to my house,
Right.
So I did ask him, I said, okay, you're a completist. Like, he is one of those, like, there's a new box set and there's only 3 new songs on it, and it's a $200 box set. He's going to get it because of those 3 new songs, right?
Sure.
And so I'm like, are you going to buy the Christmas album? I don't know. He
Yeah.
just
Well, one of the reasons I bought it, two reasons. One, it was Dylan. And the other was that I had read that for that particular album, he was donating the royalties in perpetuity to three different food banks around the world. So I thought, that's actually kind of cool.
that is.
But he does a version of Must Be Santa on that album. And I actually was running this morning and I was listening to music while I was running. And that came on and I thought, okay, it's 78 degrees. It's humid and steamy. And you would think the song didn't work while I was running, but it was perfect. I thought, okay. And so all bets are off when it comes to Bob Dylan.
So Brave Combo, which is a band here from the North Texas area.
Okay.
They do rock and roll polka.
Oh,
In
wow.
simple terms, yeah, they are a wonderful band. Google them, try things. But they did a Christmas album. That's the first version of Must Be Santa that I had heard.
Okay, and tell me again the name.
Brave Combo.
Brave Combo. All right,
Yes.
I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah, and they do. They do a lot of, they do traditional polka, but they will do a people strange polka. They will take earlier in their career, they would take different popular songs and would do them in more traditional styles.
Sure.
And so really a lot of fun. They're a fun band, great band to go live to.
Sure.
The first time we were at a club, we had gone to see the opening act, and so the opening act ended and Brave Combo was the next band up, and all of a sudden I noticed people were going to the floor, because this is like a nightclub, and they are taking the tables and they're picking them up and moving them to the side. And I'm like, what the hell? And what they were doing was building a dance floor,
right?
Because it's such a band that you dance to.
Sure, I love that stuff because it's so upbeat and it's typically really happy.
Yes, it is. They do. They're Polka Thoracis, where they do a Happy Wanderer, and just to do some other stuff. So anyway,
okay, I'm gonna have to look them up.
Yeah. Now, what I love about and I don't know how big of a fan you are of Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller.
I like what he says. I don't know much about him, but the things I've seen him saying in the last 10 or 15 years, I kind of like where he goes.
So he is a massive Dylan fan.
Okay.
And so he tells the story that Dylan's people reach out to him and says, Penn, we want you to write the liner notes for the next box set.
Okay.
And he's like, oh my God, yes. And he goes, and we're talking the religious period.
Okay.
And so there's this silence, and Penn's like, I'm an atheist, right?
Oh no.
And they're like, the whole world knows you're an atheist, Penn.
Okay.
And he kind of jokes about that, right? Like, sometimes the monkey paw principle, be careful what you wish for. He says it would be great to be able to have someone elected president that I actually know. Okay, right. I got Donald Trump.
Yeah. Right.
I adore Bob Dylan so much to be able to write the liner notes on a box set, and he gets the Christian works.
Sure.
So he agreed with you that there is a lot of good work in that.
Yeah.
He does. And then he is, as he says, it's always a good time to listen to Dylan, and he appreciates everything.
Yeah.
And he loves it. And Sam says the same thing, right? Like, his voice is what it is.
Right.
But similar to, and I know a lot of people who adore Sinatra, right? The same thing, the different stages of his, as his voice changed, you hear the mileage, which gives you another understanding of the music, not just from a perfection or beauty standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, that's great. That's good. I was supposed to go. Sam had tickets to go see him. He was playing here in Irving right outside of Dallas. And I said, well, he says, but I bought an expensive ticket, Jesse. I go, no, no, no. I'll just get one, further back,
Okay.
and then we can go to dinner together and then, hang out afterwards. And, because I've never seen Bob perform live. And it's one
Okay.
of those things where I regret that I never took time to see Petty.
Yeah, yeah,
Every
yeah,
time.
sure.
And then then you go, damn it, how did I not do that?
Right. Yeah, I know Dylan, in a couple of weeks, he's streaming a show live.
I saw that.
And there's all kinds of talk about is he playing by himself? Is he playing with a band? So I don't know anything about it. I'm going to be in Angola when that comes on. So I haven't paid too much attention to it because I suspect it'll be at a strange hour for me, but I'm going to look into that once I get there and see if it's easy for me to see it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I do think it's funny when you hear Bruce talk about Bob.
Oh my God, yeah.
That when he says, I was supposed to be the new Bob Dylan, and Bob was what, 30 at the time, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. My wife is a twin, and her twin sister's husband is a good friend of mine, and we talk music all the time.
Yeah.
And last night we were out together, and we were talking. So I'm assuming you know this because you are a Beach Boy fan, that Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney were literally born 2 days apart.
Yes.
So I saw a picture of the two of them in the last couple of days, and somebody wrote under the caption, Mount Olympus. And my buddy said to me, you mean kind of like the Mount Rushmore thing? And I said, yeah. And he's like, all right, so who else do you put on it? And I said, well, if you got McCartney, you got to put Lennon. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And then he said he would either put Barry Gibb or Elton John. And I was just like, oh, you got to put Dylan. But then we were like, well, who do you take off?
Right.
And it just got to be, it went from there to, let's just go with our top 10 guys. And so, but it was interesting that he kind of thinks the same way I did. He's like, oh, so yeah, we're complete agreement that Brian Wilson is there. We couldn't agree on anybody else, but we knew Brian Wilson was definitely there.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually did we did a couple of episodes where we discussed it, and we cheated where we did individual and groups.
Okay.
So groups, I said the Beatles, Beach Boys, Temptations, and Rolling Stones.
Okay.
Are my four.
Okay.
And then for the guy, Scott, who was with me, he said Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and Pink Floyd.
Okay.
And so for individual, I did Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, and Bob Dylan.
Okay. Wow.
With the thought that I really don't know which one I would take off, but would want to include Linda Ronstadt or Aretha Franklin.
Oh boy,
for
okay.
a female, right?
Sure.
So yes, I absolutely agree. Brian Wilson is makes that cut.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, how do you put McCartney and not Lennon?
Right.
So are they the same? And that's why us cheating by doing a band.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's fun to think about. And I think it's amazing that Dylan is still putting out new material.
Oh, and really good new material.
Yeah, it's similar to, for us Bruce fans, Letter to You, Western Stars.
Yeah.
Whether they're your cup of tea or not, you can't argue that it's not. He's not still pushing the envelope.
Sure.
He's still not trying to be creative.
It's funny. I learned with Bruce was the first guy I learned when Nebraska came out. I was 20, maybe 21. I can't remember exactly. And at first I was like, come on, man, nobody wants to hear this crap. And then it just occurred to me, he's got to do what he's got to do.
Yes.
He doesn't have to please us, and I'm not an artist. I don't have any artistic ability, whatsoever. I've read enough to know that these artists have to do what works for them.
Yeah.
And so when I heard Nebraska, I was like, okay, I get it. He had to scratch that itch. It's a fine album. It's not the E Street Band, which I prefer,
Right.
but he doesn't need to please me. He's got to please himself, I think, before he can please anybody else. So that's when I kind of learned these guys are going to go off on whatever tangent, do whatever they can do, play with whomever, and they got to make themselves happy or they're not going to be able to make anybody else happy. And one of the things I've always been, that's always kind of perplexed me is a guy like Michael Jackson, who, let's face it, Michael Jackson was a mixed up guy.
Yes.
But he brought a lot of joy to so many people.
Absolutely.
But he couldn't seem to find it himself. Same with Kurt Cobain's another one. He's another extreme. He just couldn't seem to find any happiness, and he brought happiness to so many people. And I just think that is so unfair. And, who knows, maybe if Michael Jackson had had his Nebraska or something similar, or even like a year of just being semi-normal,
right,
things might have been different for him.
And you think about the lack of quote unquote drama or / controversy of someone like Dylan,
right?
Someone like Buffett, someone like Springsteen.
Sure.
I guess, the criticism Buffett may get if he's too commercial and he's made, a brand out of his music, but
right.
So what, right?
Sure.
That doesn't, from my perspective, the Margaritaville restaurants do not take away from the joy that I receive from his music.
No,
right?
Yep.
Whatsoever.
Yep.
And I don't care if he wants to sell Margaritaville shirts or shoes or whatever. We've been on vacation and we've gone into Margaritaville and and had something to eat. It's it's perfectly fine.
And I've been to concerts where Buffett has said, "I never said I didn't want to get rich."
Yeah, exactly.
And then he'll say something like, "Thank you for supporting me, and just remember, I do spend your money foolishly." And you know what? He's obviously he's more successful than I would assume he ever imagined.
Right.
And he's having fun with it, and God bless him. You know, he's a guy who's made a lot of people happy, who seems to have found happiness himself.
Yes. Yeah, it does seem to be.
Yeah.
And that brings me joy.
Yes,
Same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I had no problem when Springsteen wanted to do the Super Bowl ad. You know, now a lot of controversy, and I think, as someone said it best, some commenter said, watching the far right and the far left complain equally about Bruce Springsteen's The Middle tells you how far from the middle we are as a nation.
Right. Yes.
Like, he equally offended both sides.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I don't. I certainly don't care that. I honestly believe, and then I'm an apologist, but I believe that this second round of going to Broadway, I take him at his word. He called into E Street Radio and he said, I was asked to do it. I said, nah, I've kind of done that already. And a buddy of his said, why wouldn't you? He said, what, you're here anyway. It's a good thing to revitalize the city and get Broadway starting again.
Right.
And you can give people a chance who didn't see it in the first run a chance to see it again.
Right.
And and people are complaining that, tickets are $800. And I'm like, well, that's the going rate of a Broadway show.
It's like why I don't go to shows on the West Coast, because I don't live there and I can't afford it. You deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's why there will always be, there are people choose how to spend their money.
Right.
And I would never criticize someone who lives in Europe that saves up their money. They gets their 3 weeks vacation and they fly to the US and they go to multiple shows. I'm envious of them, but not in a like cool, good for you
Right.
if you can do that,
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There is no everything. And and Bob, I love the fact that he reinvents himself and has gone
Yes.
through different
Yeah.
phases of, being folk and then rock and then doing different tours and
Sure.
his religious phase. And now
Yep.
then, um, won a Nobel Prize and then didn't go accept it.
Right.
That seems
One of
so
the
Bob.
one of the things I like about him is that no matter what age he is, he's always acted his age. And
Yes.
my brother is a big Aerosmith fan. I don't care for Aerosmith at all, but I'll see videos of Steven Tyler running around the stage like he's 22, and I'm like, you look like a fool. Bob Dylan has always acted his age. He doesn't run around. He has always he's always been what I expected of him, even when he surprises me. So he's just never, in the 40 years I've been listening to him, I can't think of a time he ever let me down, who he ever made me go, I can't believe I wasted my time and my life listening to this guy. It's never happened one time with him.
Yeah. And I think the difference is you are able to hear an album. For example, the first time I heard the Seeger sessions from Springsteen,
Yeah,
I went, that's not my cup of tea.
right.
Partly because some of those songs I grew up hearing, either singing in, elementary school choir, or my dad singing him, and the versions I grew up were different than the way he was doing it. Like
Right.
Froggy When a Courtin' was different the way my dad sang it than when Bruce sang it, and I
Right.
wanted Bruce to sing it the way my dad.
Right. Right.
So I went, well, this was not me. There were a couple songs I liked, but overall, this isn't me.
Right.
And then I ended up picking up the, live in Dublin,
Right.
and go, oh my goodness, why did I not go on this tour?
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing watching
Sure.
him perform it live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is, I think, and there's a small percentage, Jack, but there is a local percentage, a very vocal percentage of fans that will, well, if it doesn't speak to me, they failed.
Right.
Versus, no, as you said, Nebraska wasn't your cup of tea,
Right.
at the time, but that doesn't mean Bruce shouldn't have done it.
Correct.
Yeah. If you don't want Bob to do a Christmas album, hey, Bob Dylan's done the right to do whatever the F he wants to
Absolutely.
do, right?
Yep. And Bob Dylan has been quoted as saying, just because you like my work doesn't mean I owe you anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he's going to put it out, and if you like it, great. And if you don't, that's great too.
Yeah.
I happen to think he almost appears to be critic proof.
Yes.
And has he earned that? Probably.
Yeah.
I happen to love the fact that almost every successful, iconic musician they just acknowledge that he's the guy they're all trying to be.
Yes.
And I think that's great.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't know if you heard this. I don't know if you watched the Letter to You documentary on Apple TV.
No, I didn't see that.
All right. So it's on Apple TV. It's worth the two things. One, the subscription. Ted Lasso is the show that I adore.
Okay.
And it's on Apple TV, and it's all about Jason Sudeikis, is an American coach that gets over to England to coach soccer.
Right.
And he is a fish out of water, and he also is the most positive person in the world. And there's a lot of cynicism around, and he's just this beam of hope. And it ends up being a beautiful series.
Okay.
Second season's coming out. So that's on Apple TV. And there is a documentary where when the E Street Band last year, like in 2019, all got together to record this latest album. And they recorded 3 songs that Bruce had never officially recorded that he had written during his early time.
Okay.
And he tells the story. John Hammond said, I got a note. I shared some of your songs and I got a note. And the guy who wrote the note said that this young man better be careful. He'll run out of words of the dictionary.
Oh boy.
And that was Bob Dylan.
Sure. Okay. Wow.
So Bruce tells that story. So the subscription's worth it for that, especially you going overseas. You'll enjoy seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Well, we had prepared that we were going to do the songs of your life, but I think I'm going to save that for another recording.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tease that in a month or so after you get settled in, we'll do this. We'll figure out the time zones differences, and we'll talk about life in Africa. And then you're not only going to do songs of your life, Springsteen, but you said you can do it Buffett.
Sure.
And so, which I think would be a nice little double feature that we could throw in that. So final thoughts, anything you want to share as we've had a great hour just catching up?
No, just glad that you're healthy and you're doing well and on the mend. And I'm absolutely glad you provided some time for me to do this. I was talking to my wife a little this morning and I said, I'm kind of nervous. And she's like, you'll be fine. And I just got to thinking, well, that's true. I mean, who knows more about Buffett and Springsteen than me? Well, a lot of people do, but I know enough about it to get by. So I thought, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this. And Angola currently is 5 hours ahead of us.
Okay, so that's not bad at all.
It's not bad at all.
Yeah, that's my England show where we do a morning. I'll pick a Saturday or Sunday morning, and it'll be a Sunday or Saturday or Sunday afternoon for you.
Yep.
And then we could do that. That'd be easy. That's
Perfect.
Great. All right. If someone wants to reach you, how can they?
They may reach me via Twitter, which is at Jack Hyland 27. 27 being my favorite baseball player's number when I was a kid.
Who was that?
His name was Carlton Fisk. He was a catcher for the Boston Red Sox.
Absolutely. Very nice.
And he was my favorite player. And ever since then, 27's been my number. That way I'm on Twitter and I'm usually spouting off about, well, I hate to tell you because you live in Texas, but the knuckleheads running your state drive me insane. So
I am right there with you. There is, we are going to just for a minute, they just passed new laws that makes it so much easier to get guns here.
I know it's mind-boggling.
And he is wanting to spend money on a new wall.
Yep.
It is crazy.
Which one of your politicians? They're having a contest to see who can be the biggest idiot.
Yeah, and I will give credit. And Linda doesn't. Okay. By the way, listeners, if you don't want to hear politics, jump ahead for about 5 minutes. I appreciate not all of you want to, but Linda's like, okay, I don't trust. Why are they doing the June 19th? bill, Juneteenth? Why are they making it a federal, holiday?
Right.
Because both Ted Cruz didn't vote against it, neither did John Corwin, and my representative Michael Burgess, and all three are incredibly conservative.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz is an idiot.
Yeah.
And is absolutely courting the worst of the worst.
Yes.
And I can't believe all three of them voted yes on making this a federal holiday.
Right.
Linda thinks that there's another shoe's going to fall somewhere, that they're doing this for something.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I look at it and it's just not Texas, obviously.
Yeah.
Florida's right behind, but it's just I'm almost glad to be going to Angola. I got to get out of here before my head explodes.
Oh, I can see that. I
Yeah.
understand that totally. Yeah.
Yep.
No, so I'm right there with you, and I've always loved that you're one of the quick first people. If I am on a political rant, you're quick to reply and go, "Yes, I agree, Jesse."
Yep.
So it's
I got
always
your
nice
back.
to say, "Yes, indeed."
Yep.
All right, listeners, you please stay safe. Go get a vaccine. It's the only way we're going to get back to normal. Until then, remember to wear a mask, wash your hands, social distance, and let's all be good to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Jack, my friend, this was a blast. Thank you
Yes.
so much for visiting with me. Safe travels to you and your wife.
Thank
I
you.
hope this sounds like such a fun adventure,
Yeah, that's kind of how we're looking at it.
and
So
so
we'll make the best of it.
well, good. Well, we'll get together in a couple months, and we'll that way you'll be able to tell me the further adventures. How's that sound?
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely. I'll
right.
be in touch.
All right. Sounds good. And listeners, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank
Goodbye.
you very much, Jesse.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.